I used to believe that sacrifice always brings people closer. When our trucking business failed, we were drowning in debt. Bills stacked up on the kitchen counter, and every conversation felt heavy. Lennox told me we needed a reset. She said if I took the overseas construction contract for 2 years, we could rebuild everything. It would be hard, but it would save us. I trusted her. I thought this was something strong couples did, endure short-term pain for long-term stability. So I left Ohio and flew thousands of miles away. The job was exhausting. 16-hour shifts under brutal heat. Sandstorms that made it hard to see. I shared a small room with 2 other workers. Some nights I was so tired I slept in my work clothes. But every month when my paycheck came in, I felt proud. I wired most of it home. Around 80% went straight into our joint account. I kept just enough to survive overseas. I told myself every blister and every lonely night was worth it. At first, Lennox sounded supportive. She told me she missed me. She sent pictures of the house and talked about improvements we would make once I returned. She handled all the finances since she was home. I never questioned it. I believed we were a team. When I missed our anniversary, she said it was okay because we were building a future. When I missed my nephew's graduation, she said our time would come. But slowly things changed. Our calls became shorter. She stopped staying on the phone as long. Sometimes she said she was tired. Other times she said she was out running errands. I blamed the time difference. I blamed stress. I told myself long distance is hard for anyone. There were small moments that felt strange. Once, when I asked about the savings, she got irritated and said I didn't trust her. That hurt, so I backed off. Another time, she mentioned moving our money into a better account with higher interest. She said she'd handle it because the paperwork was easier if only one name was primary. I agreed without thinking much about it. I was thousands of miles away and just wanted things to run smoothly. I kept counting down the months. I imagined surprising her with extra savings. I imagined paying off all our debts and finally breathing again. Every lonely dinner in that crowded worker cafeteria felt like an investment in our marriage. Looking back, I can see how badly I wanted it to work. I ignored the distance in her voice. I ignored how rarely she asked about my day. I ignored the way I felt like I was fighting alone for something we were supposed to build together. At the time, I thought I was being a good husband. I thought loyalty meant trust without questions. I believed that if I worked hard enough and sacrificed enough, it would protect what we had. I had no idea how wrong I was. As the months passed, the distance between us stopped feeling temporary. It started to feel permanent. Lennox used to wait for my calls. Later, she would text, "Can't talk, busy." Sometimes I would stay awake past midnight just to catch her at a decent hour back home, only for her to cut the call short after 5 minutes. She stopped asking about the heat, the long shifts, or how I was holding up. When I told her I was exhausted, she would just say, "Well, that's what the job pays for." I told myself she was stressed. Managing the house alone wasn't easy. I tried to be understanding. One night, I asked casually how much we had saved so far. There was a pause on the line. Then her tone changed. She said I sounded like I didn't trust her. I immediately apologized. I didn't want to argue from thousands of miles away. She reminded me that she handled the finances because I was gone. She said I should focus on work and let her handle everything else. A few weeks later, she mentioned moving our savings into a higher yield account. She said it would earn more interest. She told me the bank recommended it. I didn't think twice. I told her to do whatever made sense. She said it would be easier if she transferred everything and managed it directly under her access for simplicity. I agreed. I was tired, distracted, and believed we were on the same team. Then small things kept happening. A mutual acquaintance, Darian Kessler, mentioned during a short call that he had seen Lennox around town more often lately. He said it casually, like normal conversation. Something about the way he said it stuck with me. I asked Lennox about it later. She laughed it off and said people gossip when a husband is overseas. She accused me of letting loneliness make me paranoid. I hated that word. Paranoid. After that, I tried even harder to be trusting. I sent more money home when overtime was available. I skipped taking a short leave that I was entitled to because I wanted to build our savings faster. I imagined walking back into our house debt-free, handing her the financial security we had dreamed about. But the calls grew colder. Sometimes she wouldn't answer for days. When she did, she sounded distracted. Once, I heard a door close in the background, and she quickly said she had company over. just a friend helping with something in the garage. She rushed off the phone before I could ask more. I remember staring at the blank screen after that call, feeling something twist in my chest. Not proof, just instinct. Still, I pushed it down. I kept telling myself love requires trust. I kept telling myself that suspicion would only damage what we were trying to save. I chose to believe in us instead of believing the quiet warning signs building in my gut. I didn't realize that while I was working double shifts in a foreign country, something back home was already slipping through my fingers. Before I ever stepped on that plane 2 years earlier, I had a long conversation with an older friend named Grady. He had worked overseas before and warned me about how complicated money and marriage can become when distance is involved. He didn't say anything negative about Lennox. He just told me to protect myself in smart, legal ways. At the time, I almost felt guilty for even listening. I trusted my wife. But I also knew we had already been through financial failure once with the trucking business. I didn't want to risk everything again. So I took a portion of my overseas income, not the majority, just a percentage, and structured it differently. Instead of sending every dollar into our joint account, some of it went into a separate investment account tied to a small business entity created under my name. It was completely legal. I reported everything properly. It just wasn't something Lennox ever paid attention to because she focused on the larger monthly transfers I wired home. She saw the big deposits and assumed that was all of it. When I checked that separate account after reading her message, my hands were still shaking. But when I saw the balance there, I finally exhaled. It wasn't as large as the joint savings had been, but it was solid. It was enough to stand on. More importantly, I remembered something else. Before leaving Ohio, I had briefly consulted an attorney to understand what could happen if things ever fell apart while I was overseas. He explained that certain legal steps must be followed in divorce cases, especially if one spouse is out of the country for work. Formal service of papers was required. A simple notification wasn't enough. A text message didn't legally end a marriage. The next morning, after barely sleeping, I searched my email. No official documents. No formal notice. Nothing sent to my overseas address. Just that cold text. I contacted a law office back home and explained the situation. After reviewing the information, they told me something important. Filing for divorce and completing a divorce are two different things. If I had not been properly served, the process wasn't finalized. That changed everything. It meant the financial transfers happened during a pending marriage. It meant there were questions about how and when the money was moved. It meant the story wasn't as simple as she left and took everything. For the first time since reading her message, I didn't feel powerless. I didn't call her again. I didn't send angry messages. I didn't beg for explanations. I quietly hired an attorney named Merritt Caldwell and began gathering every document I had. Wire transfers, pay stubs, tax records, contracts. Lennox believed she had closed the door with one message. She had no idea I was about to open another one, in a courtroom. Once Merritt started reviewing everything, the picture became clearer. She was calm and direct. She told me not to react emotionally and not to contact Lennox. Everything had to be handled carefully. We requested official court documents and confirmed what we suspected. The divorce had been filed, but I had never been properly served while overseas. Legally, the marriage was still active. That mattered more than I realized. Because the marriage was still active, the large transfers Lennox made from our joint account were still considered movements of marital assets. And the timing raised questions. Most of the money had been transferred just before she sent that text message. Merritt filed a response on my behalf and requested full financial disclosure. If Lennox believed I would just disappear quietly, she was wrong. During the legal discovery process, more details surfaced. The account where the money had been transferred wasn't just in Lennox's name. Another name appeared repeatedly in the paperwork. Darian Kessler. Seeing it in official documents felt different than hearing it casually mentioned months earlier. Funds from our joint savings had been used for renovations on the house. Payments had also been made toward refinancing the property. The title adjustments were made shortly before she filed for divorce. It looked organized. Planned. When Lennox responded through her attorney, she claimed I had emotionally abandoned the marriage by leaving the country. She said I chose work over family and that she had been forced to move forward alone. Reading that stung. I had taken that job because we both agreed it would save us financially. Fortunately, facts don't disappear just because someone changes the story. We presented records of every wire transfer I sent home. Messages where she encouraged me to extend the contract to earn more. Notes where she thanked me for sacrificing so much. Bank statements showing the pattern of deposits over 2 years. Then came the forensic review of the drained savings. The court ordered a detailed accounting. Every transfer had to be explained. Every dollar traced. That's when the connection between Lennox and Darian became impossible to ignore. Shared expenses. Linked transactions. Payments that didn't match her explanations. I wasn't in the courtroom physically for the first hearings, but I listened remotely. I stayed quiet. I didn't want revenge through shouting or drama. I wanted truth documented. The judge made it clear that improper transfer or concealment of marital funds could carry serious consequences, especially if done during pending divorce proceedings. For the first time since that Tuesday night, I felt something shift. This wasn't just heartbreak anymore. It was accountability. The final hearings took months. Legal processes move slowly, especially when money is involved. By the time I returned to the United States, the case was deep into financial review. Walking back into Ohio felt strange. The house I had worked so hard to protect no longer felt like home. I didn't try to go there. Everything went through attorneys. In court, Lennox continued to argue that she had acted out of necessity. She said she believed the marriage was over long before she filed. She claimed the money was used for stability and future planning. But when the forensic accountant presented the full breakdown of transactions, the story didn't hold up. Large transfers had been made in structured amounts. Renovation invoices were tied to upgrades that increased the property's value just before refinancing. Payments connected to Darian appeared repeatedly in overlapping timelines. The judge focused on one key issue: intent. The transfers were not small living expenses. They were significant marital assets moved while the divorce process was incomplete. And because I had not been properly served at the time, those actions raised serious legal concerns. When the ruling finally came, it wasn't dramatic. There was no shouting, just clear decisions. The court ordered restitution for improperly transferred funds. A portion of the home's equity was awarded to me. The refinancing maneuver didn't shield the property from division. The financial penalties were not small. There were also tax implications triggered by the way the money had been moved. For the first time since that text message, I felt steady again. Not because Lennox was punished. Not because I won. But because the truth had been documented and acknowledged. The separate investment account I had protected remained intact. Combined with the restitution and equity division, I was financially stable again. Not untouched by damage, but not destroyed either. 2 years later, my life looks very different. I bought a modest home near Lake Erie. Nothing flashy, just quiet and solid. I started a logistics consulting firm using the skills I developed overseas. The long shifts, the planning, the contract management, it all turned into something productive. Some nights I sit on the back porch and think about that message. For sentences that tried to erase 8 years. I don't feel anger anymore. I feel clarity. Lennox believed she could end everything with a text and a bank transfer. What she didn't understand was that patience is stronger than panic. Silence can be more powerful than rage. And preparation matters more than impulse. She thought she had taken my future. There's one thing I haven't talked about yet. A few weeks after the final ruling, Lennox asked to meet. Not through emotion. Not through apology. Through her attorney. At first, I didn't want to go. I felt like everything that needed to be said had already been handled in court. But part of me needed closure, not from her, but for myself. We met in a quiet office conference room. No drama. No raised voices. She looked different. Not physically, but the confidence she once carried was gone. She didn't start with an apology. She started with explanations. She said she felt lonely. She said she thought I cared more about money than about her. She said she didn't believe I would fight back. That sentence stayed with me. She didn't believe I would fight back. Maybe she thought the distance made me weak. Maybe she thought I was too trusting to protect myself. Or maybe she thought guilt would keep me silent. I listened without interrupting. Then I told her something simple. I went overseas because we agreed it was for us. I trusted you because you were my wife. The assets were divided. The truth was recorded. Whatever emotional bond we once had was gone long before that text message. When I walked out of that building, I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. Not free because she lost something. Free because I didn't lose myself. Betrayal changes you. It forces you to look at your own blind spots. I learned that trust is important, but blind trust is dangerous. I learned that sacrifice should be mutual. And I learned that protecting your future isn't selfish. Sometimes people think revenge means destruction. But the strongest form of revenge is stability. It's rebuilding quietly. It's succeeding without noise. It's refusing to become bitter. She thought one message could erase me. Instead, it revealed who she truly was and who I needed to become. And that, in the end, was worth more than the money she tried to take.